Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Book Nook, our cozy little corner to talk all things book-related. My name's Abi.
And my name is Sarah, and we are going to be your hosts.
So we're going to start off by introducing a little bit about ourselves so that you know who exactly is talking to you. So, like I said, my name's Abi. I'm a biochemistry major, and I'm minoring in art and health sciences. I'm from Katy, Texas, which is about an 8-hour drive. So around the Houston area. On campus, I'm involved in research. I work in the stock room. I'm part of the podcast club. I'm part of MedX as a pre-med. Some of my hobbies, I'm a reader. I draw. Honestly, my main hobby is sleeping. I won't lie.
I can vouch.
Oh, and one fun fact about myself is that I have a boating license in the state of Pennsylvania.
I did not know that one.
Only there.
Okay, I'm Sarah. I'm a double major in computer science and German. I'm involved in several different things on campus. I'm a comp sci and a German tutor. I'm in ACM, which is the Association for Computing Machinery.
Join it, please.
Yeah, we need members. And then I'm also in RUF, and I am in the TU Orchestra. I really enjoy reading, artsy crafts projects.
All the hobbies.
Oh, all the hobbies. Baking, cooking. I might not be good at most of them, but I do them.
She's very good at baking.
I am. I am also very good at cake decorating. And then I'm from Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is about a 2-hour drive from Tulsa. And I don't know. That's me.
What's one fun fact?
Oh, one fun fact. Okay. I've been to Germany 7 times.
Dang.
Yeah.
I've only left the country like twice. Okay, so some of the things that this book podcast is going to encompass is we're going to have something called the Book of the Month, which we'll get into a little bit later in the podcast. We're going to also talk about some book drama, our thoughts on book talk, book stuff, whether we like
Coho.
whether we like it or not. We'll talk about our thoughts on some genres, some book tropes. I know book tropes are
Our favorite, our least favorite.
talking to you, miscommunication.
Or pregnancy trope. L.
Yeah, and then we'll just and then we're going to talk about some book analysis as we read, and then you can join us in any of the books that we're reading. So, for this podcast, we're going to be doing a genre breakdown of our top 5 genres, just so you can get a little taste of what we like to read and see who you identify with more. Because I will say we have very different tastes, but I think our top genre is like pretty similar.
Oh, yeah.
We do have a lot of the same books, so...
Yeah. At least all the ones that aren't your, like, true crime and, like, murder stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Oh, shout out to Gardeners for supplying me with all of my true crime and forensic books.
Yes.
Go there if you need any used books. Okay, so we're going to go from 5 to 1, 5 being our least favorite out of our favorites. And then 1 obviously being our top one. So I feel like mine is this is not a popular opinion, but my number 5 is actually nonfiction. So whenever I was a kid, I was really big into reading. However, the only thing I was interested in was dinosaur books. And I couldn't even read yet. And I had probably like 10 dinosaur books that were like very thick. And I would just stare at the pictures until I could read. So nonfiction has always had a like very special place in my heart. I remember some of my summers in elementary and middle school, I would go to our community library and I would rent out these like chemistry books, which explains why I ended up being a biochem major. And I would take notes on those books at the library because I was a freaking nerd. So we're also going to give some book recommendations that we really enjoyed in each of our genres. So the one I chose is one of my forensic books that was actually gifted to me by a friend. It was called Working Stiff by Judy Melanik. So she's a forensic pathologist, which is actually what I want to be whenever I finally get out of my very long path of school.
Med school,
Woo! Only like 12 more years. It's fine. And she was actually a forensic pathologist in New York City, and as you know, New York City is kind of a crazy city, especially when she was a forensic pathologist. Crime was rampant. She was also a forensic pathologist during 9/11, so she talks a lot about her experience IDing bodies or what was really left of bodies. And I think it's a very insightful read because a lot of your doctors, you think of people that want to become doctors, they want to help treat people that are alive. Not a lot of your like hospice type or even dealing with postmortem, how you can help people in that way. And I think it's very insightful and a little heart-wrenching, so if you are in for an emotional read, I definitely recommend it.
Okay, and then my number 5 on my list is biographies. I haven't read a lot of them, but the ones I have read have been really good. And one of my favorites is Where the Wind Leads by Vin Chung. And the story begins post-Vietnam War, and his family, so he's just been born, and his family decides to flee Vietnam. And they come to America as refugees, and it follows their story of, like, adversity and sticking together with their family. And then it continues his story through med school and becoming a doctor. And I would have never picked this book up, but the author came to my elementary school and gave a talk because when he was a refugee, they came to Fort Chaffee, which is just like kind of in Fort Smith. I would say kind of right outside of Fort Smith. So he was local, which is cool. And my mom has a signed copy of his book. Yeah. And it's just a really good book. I would definitely recommend. I want to say minor trigger warnings because there's some mentions of like sexual assault during the first part of the book. But overall, just a really good read.
Yeah, I definitely miss when authors would come to my elementary. I would think those were my favorite talks because it's kind of interesting to see their like path to writing these books, especially explaining it to like kids that are under the age of like 11. I think kudos to them.
I know. I feel like it also encourages kids to read a little bit because like you get to meet like sometimes famous authors, but even if they're not famous, it's just still really cool because like I mean, oh, this author's coming. I'll read their book and then I can ask them questions about it.
Which foreshadowing is exactly what happened with our book of the month.
Oh yeah.
So my number 4 is kind of along the same path as a biography, but in the fictional sense. So my number 4 is historical fiction, which is actually probably one of the genres that I started reading once I started again. Like, I definitely took a break between elementary and, like, junior high because I got a lot going on, and my parents kind of banned me from buying books because I got in trouble, and so I got grounded from buying books, so I didn't have anything to read for a while, but it's okay. So, yeah, I really like reading and learning about history, and I would take more classes like that if I had space on my schedule, but I kind of like to hear it through a story lens because, you know, history, it's kind of hard to understand the emotions that people were feeling during these, like, very honestly traumatic experiences, or even not traumatic, but I feel like you get to, like, grow a bond with these people and truly empathize with them. So one of my book recommendations is definitely one that most of you have probably heard or read, The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. And don't read this book if you don't want to cry. I cry every single time I read it. It does not matter how many times I've read it. And it's also a very long book, so if you're not into long books, then maybe don't pick this one up. But this one's about Liesel. I don't think Liesel? I don't know. I'm sorry. So she loses her whole family whenever her mom and her brother get sent to go work at a concentration camp in World War II, and she ends up moving in with a German family, and she learns to read while stealing books from one of the prominent people that are in her little town, but she also has to keep Max, a Jew in her basement, a secret from this whole German village. And honestly, you know, I feel like when you think of historical fiction, you typically think of World War II type books, but I find this book extremely special because it's actually told mostly in the point of view of death as like this omniscient type overseer. And honestly, I think I've never heard of a character death being a narrator, and I think it puts it in even a worse lens, like a sad lens. And I definitely recommend it if you want a World War II book that's not necessarily about like the war, but more of like what's going on socially outside of it in like your German cities, where maybe people don't necessarily agree with the Nazis, but they don't really have much of a choice. My number 2 is Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. So this is about 15-year-old Lena, who is arrested by the Soviet secret police, and she's deported to one of the gulag camps in Siberia. And she is from Lithuania, and it's about the story of her survival and her family trying to fight to make it out. I definitely recommend any books by Ruta Sepetys. I think she tells a lot of historical fiction stories that you might not think of in history. Like, she has one about Spain, which I haven't read yet, but it's on my bookshelf. But I don't know, guys. I read a lot of sad books. What can I say? It's definitely a sad book, but like this one hits home for me because my mom's also from Eastern Europe, and obviously during this time my mom was not alive, but her grandparents were, and my mom's from a country that ended up becoming communist, not necessarily Soviet, but definitely Soviet influence. So it kind of paints into like my ancestry a little bit, which I really enjoyed.
Okay. My number 4 is also historical fiction, but Abby reads much more sophisticated books than I do. So, my top pick for this genre right now is Sky in the Deep by Adriana Young. And it's giving Viking. The story focuses on these two like main rival clans, and it's the story that follows a girl who, like, every season these two clans like go to battle. In the previous year or two, it's been a while since I've read this book, but she lost her brother in one of the battles, and so when they go to fight again this year, she is blindsided when she sees her brother, and she's like, how is he not dead? And this enemy clan captures her. And the story pretty much follows what happens after that. And I would 100% recommend. It's got some enemies to lovers in it, some getting over betrayal, and just also a very strong female lead, which I like.
I feel like it's hard to find in a lot of historical type. So
I feel like Vikings, I feel like Vikings are a little different when it comes to that, because like all of them are supposed to be strong. It's not just like, oh, strong man. But I really like that book. I picked that one up I just saw it on somebody's book talk, and I was like, oh, that looks cool. And I haven't seen it a lot, but I've seen it enough that like it's not super unheard of. So I would give that a read if you want to.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that author, but I actually haven't read anything by her. I'll have to give her a look.
Yeah, I think her other series or trilogy is more popular, but I haven't read it. I like this one though.
Okay, so getting into our number 3. So mine is just plain old fiction, your baseline fiction, because honestly, sometimes I don't really want to think. I know you guys, like, midterm season's about right now. It just is winding down for people, and honestly, it's a lot. My brain hurts. So sometimes I don't really want to focus on world building. It's kind of comforting to read about a world that's the same as our own. So I have 2 recommendations for this. You'll learn that I have 2 recommendations for almost everything because I could not choose one. One is Anxious People by Frederick Backman. He's actually a very famous author for, like, the fiction genre, and he has a lot of good books. This is the only one I've read, but I have some on my shelf that I want to get into. So this was actually gifted to me by my friend who thought I would like it based off of a Instagram reel, and she was right. Because it has a little true crime element, but it's also a very raw book, just talking about how, like, people in different situations, we're kind of all the same in the end, we just are trying to get by. So the synopsis for this one is 8 people become unlikely friends in a house viewing turned hostage situation by an inept bank robber. And I will tell you, this book has definite plot twists. I I also kind of cried in this one because, as a trigger warning, this one does deal with some depression and suicide. Maybe. I don't remember if there's attempts or if it's just, like, the thought. But I definitely recommend it. I think it's really funny. I laughed a lot during it, and then also obviously very sad moments, but I think it puts into perspective that, in the end, everyone has their own struggles, and we need to help each other up. And my number 2, this one is I'm going to preface this by this one's a very large trigger warning, so this one is specifically about child molestation and sexual assault. So if those are not your things or you don't want to deal with that, definitely skip this book. But I read this in high school, and I think, specifically during COVID, that it opened my eyes a lot to a lot of things. So this one's called Such a Pretty Girl by Laura Weiss. And so this one's about Meredith, and Meredith's father is behind bars, but instead of the 9-year sentence that he got, he's going to get out in 3 off of parole. But the thing is, she's freaking out because now she's 15, and she was supposed to be 18 before he got out and long gone to never see her father again. And I think in this book deals a lot with how our system's broken when it comes into terms of, like, pedophiles and child molesters, and how it's really not about keeping the children safe per se, because in the end, as we know, a lot of these people don't end up behind bars. And she actually ends this book with a tidbit about how to look up the pedophiles in your area or just the sexual assaulters. And I looked up my area where I live, and I was very surprised to find how many actually live very close to me and how many of them actually live in the gated communities. So I think, this is a read that you definitely have to be in a good mind space for, because it's very emotional, and you ache for this character in this situation that she's been put through. And I will say it has a slight happy ending. I mean, obviously, in a case like hers, there really is no happy ending because this shouldn't have happened in the first place. But if you're worried about it ending bad, it doesn't. She gets out.
Okay. My number 3 is dystopian. And generally I read dystopian with fantasy elements. So, my top one, okay, so I have one finished series and one unfinished series. I'm currently rereading the second Shatter Me book, by Tara Mafi. I might have butchered that, but I'm trying. I initially read the first 3 books of the series when I was in high school, and I really loved them, and I'm picking them back up again just so that I can finish the series. But I really like it. When I went back and read the first book again this summer, I do feel like it is quite a bit more childish than I remember. But I think the series gets better as I continue on, and it follows a girl who's developed, like, the ability to kill people with her touch. And she spent the last, I don't know how many days, I think it might have been 365 days or something, in, like, a prison cell alone. And she is very, like, broken, and she, speaks in, like, fragments and thinks in fragments, and, like, just, it's, the whole book, the first book progresses just, like, is her growth and her figuring out who she is, which I think is really cool. And then also, like, a lot of world building, the society they live in and how they ended up where they are. But I'm excited to finish that one. And then my number 2 is the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. I loved all of those books except for the very ending of War Storm.
We don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, no. I won't say anything because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it. But let's just say I was very sad for the ending for quite a few of the characters.
Yeah, I feel like it didn't wrap it up the right way.
I get why she did it the way she did, but at the same time, like, I was hoping for a happier ending.
Yes, which I realize not everything can be a happy ending, but
yeah.
But, like, bro, I read 4 really thick books for this.
But the main premise of the story is that they live in a society where they're divided by the color of their blood. there are red bloods, and then I believe silver is, and the silver bloods have, like, powers, which here's the fantasy element for this dystopian series. But Mare, yes. Yeah, Mare develops these powers at the beginning of the book, and it's in a very, like, shocking way, and the society has to find a way to deal with it.
Because she's a red blood.
Yeah, because she is a red blood, and they try to cover this fact up throughout the first book, but then everything just comes, like, crashing down at the very end, and that sets up the rest of the series, which is just a big war. But it's very good, very interesting read, some romance elements. I will say, I think the third book has quite a bit of, like, abusive situations in it, so trigger warning there, just in case. But, yeah, very good. Would recommend.
I do love the Red Queen series.
Yes.
I hope they make it into a movie or something. I think it'd be such a good movie.
I think Peacock picked it up as a TV series. I'd have to double check on that, but I think they did, because I know she posted something on her Instagram that somebody picked it up.
And she has a new series I definitely want to read. I like her world building, honestly.
I do too.
She's a very good, and I love her book covers.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, guys, I know we all say we don't like to judge books by their covers, but when you go into a bookstore, it's very easy to look for the pretty covers because that's what you're drawn to.
I will say, I was book shopping with my boyfriend one day, and we were talking about it, and I was like, I know they say don't judge a book by their cover, but I 100% do. And the lady, like, 5 feet away from me, like, turned to me, and she said, oh, girl, same.
Listen, the book community is tight.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So for my number 2, I love a good romance read. I mean, I typically read books, like any of the books that I mentioned typically have some type of romance subplot. Whether that, like, progresses anywhere, it's not necessarily, it doesn't matter to me, and sometimes I do prefer when it is more of the subplot. Like, I appreciated in, like, Red Queen how it wasn't, especially because, like,
it wasn't overpowering.
So I'm like, honestly, it's pretty traumatic in the beginning for her. So I'm glad that they focused more on, like, her experience rather than the romance. But I do love a good book that I can read in one sitting, and I gobble romance books up. Like, for preface, I went on vacation with my family to Pennsylvania, and in those 5 days that I was there, I read 5 books, and almost all of them were romance. So, and also, I do love romance because currently in a long-distance relationship, and I need it. It makes me feel, gotta keep that spark. So, Ryan, if you're listening, I miss you. But some of my recommendations for this is Alex Approximately by Jen Bennett. I really love any of the books by Jen Bennett, so I recommend, like, any of them, but this was the first one that I read. So this one is about movie-obsessed 17-year-old Bailey moves in with her dad on the coastal town of California the summer before her senior year. And she secures this job working in kind of this tourist trap museum as, her job changes, actually, so I'm not going to get into that. But she also has been talking to another movie-obsessed geek online named Alex. But her feelings are a little conflicted because one of the security guards at this tourist museum is putting on the moves, and she's kind of liking it. So it's kind of between... I will say it's good. I find this has really good banter. It's more of... I wouldn't say complete enemies to lovers, but, like, more of, like, misunderstanding at the beginning where, like, a small thing makes you, like, not like the other person. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say full-blown enemies to lovers. But I really like this book, and I've read it, like, 6 times. I will not lie. And the second one is actually one that I did read on that 1-week trip to Pennsylvania where I read 5 books, called A Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walter. You might have seen this. I think it was pretty popular on Book Talk, but I really like this. This one, the banter in this is so good. And just, like, I've never heard of a book with this kind of plot. So basically, it's about a summer wedding in Martha's Vineyard. But there's also a game of assassin. And if you don't know what assassin is, basically it's like everyone gets somebody's name, and you have to shoot them with water and then you get their name, and then it ends up in like a final brawl. And they're doing this in light of the main character's sister, who passed away, which right before this wedding. So, but I'd say this one's more of an enemies to, well, I don't even know, maybe friends to lovers, because the guy in this movie is one of the groomsmen from the other family that's marrying in, and I really like this book. I think it's definitely like an easy read that you could read in one sitting where you can't stop.
Okay. I will definitely be putting that one on my TBR.
It's so good.
So my number 2 genre, fantasy, of course. And like Abby said, I'm a big romance girly too. So most of my reads have romance at least as a subplot. And so I have 2 picks for this one. One's a trilogy, one's a series. And my series is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Most of you have probably heard of it if you were book talk girlies. And I mean, most of you probably also know the premise of the book, but the first book starts out with this assassin, and she is in this game to become the king's assassin, and the plot just like continues to thicken from there. It doesn't slow down. But I will say the first 2 books of the series were my least favorite. So if you pick it up and you struggle to get through those, just know that I thought it gets better. So hopefully if you continue it, that you think it gets better. But I will say the last book of the series broke my heart at some points, and I did cry. I think that was one of the first books that I actually was bawling my eyes out at the end. And then my favorite fantasy trilogy is the Crown of Feathers trilogy by Nikki Pau-Credo. I will hype this trilogy up as much as I possibly can because it's not super popular, but this girl, Veronica, and her sister, Val, are kind of hiding from the Empire, and they really want to be Phoenix Riders. But this is kind of outlawed, at least where they're from. And so the story follows her, hatching a phoenix and then going to join this group of kind of, riders that are rebels, in a sense. And it gives kind of a Mulan vibe because she has to pretend to be a boy to join this group of riders. And I think it's really cool. You get little snippets of an outside perspective at the beginning of every chapter. It's kind of like this whole story from before. Lots of themes of resurrection and animal magic and shadow magic. I would 100% recommend it to anybody who likes fantasy. It gives more of a high fantasy feel than some of the books I read. So, yeah.
Okay, and to our number 1s. So mine, before I say it, I'll say this is the genre that got me really into reading again. I know we all remember the Hunger Games, Divergent days. Divergent broke my heart. I don't want to talk about it. But mine is definitely dystopian with fantasy elements, also some romance subplot in most of the books I read. But it doesn't need to have romance for me to want to read it. But this definitely got me back into reading again. And looking at some of the old books I read, I realized that they're not as good as I remember. Other than Hunger Games. Hunger Games is the exception. That is good.
Well, that's when I was talking about the Shatter Me series. Reading the first couple books in high school, I was so into it. And then I was rereading the first one, and I was like, this is not as good as I remember it. It wasn't bad, but...
Yeah. But definitely, we love the Hunger Games. Catching Fire is the best book. I said what I said. So one of my favorites is actually the Cinder series by Marissa Meyer. I definitely recommend any books by Marissa Meyer except for one, Instant Karma. I could just not get past the protagonist. It was just really bad.
I was gonna say I'm gonna plug Heartless real quick.
Heartless
Such
is
a good book.
Yes, because that's it's kind of a book that a fairy tale retelling that you wouldn't think
it's kind of like Well, I don't want to say that because it'll, like, give away the
It's
ending.
dark.
It is
definitely
dark. Yeah.
We'll just say that it is about the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland type retelling.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you're into that, I definitely recommend that book.
And it's a very sad ending, too.
Yes. But it makes sense. Like, that made sense for the book. But the Cinder series is one of the first ones that I found of her. And I think it's 4 books or 5 books with the novella. But it's about... So, each part of the series is a different fairy tale retelling. So you'll have Cinder, which is Cinderella, Scarlet, which is Little Red Riding Hood, then Cress. I think that's the name of the character. I can't remember what the third book was like called, but that's like a Rapunzel type. And then Winter, I think it's Snow White-ish. So I'll just press it by Cinder. We'll just talk about Cinder, since that's like the first book. So it's about a teenage cyborg that has to deal with her wicked stepmom and taking down the evil queen in one. And a handsome prince might be involved too. I think this book was really good action-wise, but also, you know, I'm not really into a lot of like political turmoil in books, but like I think this one was really well done. And you know, it touches on a lot of other themes, too, obviously, with, like, cyborgs versus humans. So, I definitely recommend it. I think it definitely still holds its weight. And they just came out with new covers, like the 10-year covers. So
I got those.
They're so cute, guys. I really might buy a second set of the series just for the covers. It's good.
I do not condone purchasing on Amazon, but that doesn't mean that I don't do it. But I bought the new covers off of Amazon because they were cheap.
It's definitely... And it's strong, like... a lot of strong female heroines. Like, each one, it's female. It's like, yeah, there's like romantic subparts to them, but the guy's kind of useless half the time. So girl power, you know. Not to say that I don't like books where there's a male protagonist. I do enjoy like Aragon and stuff like that. I don't think I said that right.
You said that right.
Yes.
You usually say it wrong.
Oh, I usually say Aragon, guys. Like, I know, it's bad. But Aragon, I that's a fantasy book, though.
Yeah.
My second one is Stung by Bethany Wiggins. So this is definitely a book that I read when I was younger, and it's, like, similar to what you said with Shatter Me, where it's, like, it's definitely more childish, but, like, I still enjoy reading it. I think it's good. So this is about Fiona, who goes to bed 13 and wakes up 17 with a weird spider tattoo on her hand. Only the world isn't quite what she remembers. And there are zombie-like creatures? ? So, yes. I really like this book. Because I feel like this was not a very talked about book. Like,
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, no, this is a book that like a lot of people haven't heard about, and I really enjoyed it. So it's basically about these people that got infected. And so that's like the zombie-like creatures. Is like they got infected with something. And they all have that tattoo on their hand. But for some reason, Fiona's normal, but she has this tattoo. So it's kind of interesting. And then there's like this wall where like the normal people live. And there's something to do with bees. I'll say that. There's not a lot of them left. So like food-wise, it's kind of like your apocalyptic type scenario. And there's 2. This is a duology. So there's 2 books. But like I think you can definitely just read the first book as like a standalone. Like the second book's like good, but I don't think it's as good as the first one.
Okay. Cool. And then my number one genre, fantasy romance or romantasy. So I'm going to first talk about the real popular one, but ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Most of you probably know what this is. But my favorite book out of the series is definitely A Court of Mist and Fury. And I'm kind of on the fence about this. I'm just going to talk about this, like, real quick. But I kind of wish it had stopped at, like, just the, like, original trilogy. Not that I don't like...
I 100% agree. I haven't finished it, but, like, I can't... Like, I know what the other books are about.
Yeah, not that I don't like... Like, I've read the novella and A Court of Silver Flames, and they were good. But I feel like it's also kind of ruining the original story for me. But I'm still going to keep reading.
We're going to say this. Not every character deserves a redemption arc. That's what I'm saying. Like you know, it's okay to be evil. It's okay to be the villain.
It is okay. I will say I did like Nesta after the last book. Abby thinks she won't, but
Yeah, guys, I'll get to it eventually. It's
yeah.
a very long series.
Yeah. But this is a conversation for another day.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about this when we get into book talk, book stuff.
Oh yeah. And then my second pick is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I don't think this is super popular. I haven't really seen it on Book Talk, and honestly, I wouldn't have picked it up, but I started like a Fairy Loot subscription about a year ago, and this was the second book I got, and I got it, and I was like, haven't heard of this, but okay, and I read it, and I absolutely loved it. I have seen a lot of reviews where people say it's a lot like this other book, and I can't remember what that book's called. It might be Vespertine or something. But this girl lives in a world where... This is kind of complicated and hard to explain. But they kind of have to deal with this darkness/fog in the forest, and what their magic system is kind of like a tarot card system, but each level of card has a different ability, and there's like fewer of them as they go. I think it starts at like 12, and then as you progress there's like fewer of the types, but to use the card comes at a cost, and so the more you use it, the greater the cost, and she touches this card that contains the nightmare, and throughout the book she works in tandem with this creature of sorts. I'm not going to say exactly what's going on, because in all honesty, I'm not 100% sure. I'm still... Okay, I'm waiting for the second book. It, like, just came out 2 days ago, but I'm waiting to read it till I can get a matching edition. There's definitely some enemies to lovers, and I love the magic system. I'm trying to think about what else. It's also very... If you like rhymes, at the beginning of every chapter, there's, like, some rhymes that are just really cool that pertain to the cards themselves. So I would 100% recommend if you were a romantic-y girly.
Speaking of Fairy Loot, maybe, like, if you guys are interested, we could bring all Sarah's books.
Oh, yeah.
And we can just...
My collection.
And just show them, because honestly, they're really cool books, and they're not books that I've necessarily heard of. Like, I got one because Sarah got a double of one.
Yeah, I got a double box 1 month.
We should maybe do that one.
I think it was Sing Me to Sleep.
Have you read it?
I haven't read it yet.
We should do that one.
We should do that one.
Yeah, but if you guys are interested, let us know, because...
Oh, yeah, I could do a whole talk on all my Fairy Loot editions.
That'd be like a 3-hour long.
Yeah.
If I had the money,
yeah,
I definitely would invest in that one too.
Mm-hmm.
So those are our top 5 genres. So maybe, you learn a little bit more about what the type of books we like to read, and maybe you heard about a book that you might be interested in reading, or maybe you even have recommendations for us on these genres, and you are more than welcome to comment on the TU Studio 151 Instagram. Let us know. What are some of your book recommendations? And we will try to get around to them. I know we have very long TBRs.
I have a very extensive TBR, but I keep adding to it. So recommend away.
Please. So we're going to get now into one of the ideas that's going to continue out throughout this podcast is our book of the month. So Sarah and I are going to choose a book every month to read together, and we're going to annotate it and stuff like that, or choose points. Like, not so much, like, I know you might have seen, like, those, like, where they tab, like, every single thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, maybe parts that really stuck out to us, like, plot elements, maybe some themes. Just, like, talk about the book, and, like, not in, like, a super serious, like, AP Lit way, but kind of, like, just, like, friends talking over some tea and books.
Our thoughts and feelings. And
yeah, so if you guys want to read this book along with us and tell us your thoughts and feelings about it, we're actually going to read I Brought It today. So this is actually our shared 4th genre, called, obviously, historical fiction. So this one is called All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr.
Yeah.
And you might have, this was very popular on Booksta about a couple, I'd say like 3 years ago. Like, I remember seeing this
I think
book.
it was just really popular in general.
Yeah, because this is actually a Pulitzer Prize winning book. And if you didn't know, or maybe you weren't at school at TU last year, Anthony Doerr actually was one of our presidential speakers, where we have one a semester that comes and talks. And he actually gave a talk, and when Sarah and I went, we actually got to meet him, and he is the nicest person.
He was so sweet.
And, like, do you want to talk a little bit about his talk? Like, what are your thoughts on how he looks versus what his talk was about?
Oh, goodness. Well, okay. So my thoughts, he was doing a big talk about his newest book, which I think was called Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Yes.
Which also sounds really cool because it follows like 6 different timelines, I think.
Yeah, and like past, future, present. So it's like I've never heard of that being done in the book.
Yeah, no, but he went over his whole like process of what it takes to like write a book, and especially like something that extensive and all the research that he has done. He didn't talk a whole lot about all the light we cannot see, but he briefly went over it. I'm trying to think.
So I'll tell you, if you search up this man, he looks so much more serious than he actually is.
He does look kind of scary. He's like bald.
No shade to Anthony
No,
Doerr.
no.
But
Yeah.
he gave the most interesting talk. Like, his personality is like the opposite. He was so funny. And, you know, makes me want to read more of his books, because the research that goes into his books is honestly impressive. Like, it takes him years to write these books.
Well, because I think the last one he did was All the Light We Cannot See, and then didn't it take him, like, has it been, like, 8 years or something between?
Let me look at when it came. 2014, yeah.
So, it took him, like, almost 8 years to come out with another book, because that's, like, how extensive the research had to be. Like, to write from 6 different perspectives in different times and just different cultures is such a crazy thing to do.
Especially, like, coming up with, I don't think they're necessary. Oh, wait, are they based on real places? I can't
Some
remember.
of them are based on real places, but like because one of the perspectives is during COVID, I think.
Yes, that's what it was.
But and then the past ones I think are based on real places, but the future one, I think is completely imaginative, and I think that the story follows like a book or a story that's passed on through these times, which I think is really cool.
The power of reading, y'all. And I know it's a turn off for some people when books talk about, like, current times, especially when you've lived through, like, COVID. But, like, maybe give it a chance, because I feel like this is a very unique type book. But I'm going to actually read the back of this book, the little synopsis. So if this piques your interest, maybe you'll join us in reading it. Marie Laure?
It's French. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
LeBlanc lives with her father in Paris near the Museum of Natural History, where he works. When she is 12, the Nazis occupy Paris, and father and daughter flee to the walled city of Saint-Malo, where Marie Laurie's reclusive great-uncle lives in a tall house by the sea. With them, they carry what might be the museum's most valuable and dangerous jewel. In a mining town in Germany, Warner... You might be able to say this name, because she is German over here.
Yeah. 1 second. I would say Vanna, Fennig.
Okay,
but
thank you.
Yeah.
An orphan grows up with his younger sister, enchanted by a crude radio they find that brings them news and stories from places they've never seen or imagined. Werner, I'm sorry guys, I only speak English, it's my downfall, becomes an expert at building and fixing these crucial new instruments and is enlisted to use his talent to track down the resistance. Marie Laure and Werner, from warring countries, both have lost many of the people they love. Come together in St. Malo, as Doerr illuminates the ways against all odds people try to be good to one another. This took 10 years to write this book, so it's a Pulitzer Prize for a reason. I think this is a very interesting World War II historical fiction. This is not something, like, you don't, like, yes, there are obviously books about Paris.
Yeah, but it's not, like, I think when I think World War II, I think, like, the big focus is, like, on the Jews and on, like, Nazis, which, I mean, yes, they do, because Werner is a Nazi, but not, like, he's just a soldier. Yes. And the beginning of the book, I've read the first 60 pages just to, like, pique my interest before the talk. And in all honesty, like, he's not there because he believes in what's happening.
Which is a lot of what ended up happening for a lot of Germans.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Because, listen, Sarah and I were on opposite sides of the war in World War II. But, you know, just because someone's German doesn't mean that, you know.
Well, yeah,
that
I
they
mean,
were
like,
Nazi.
history is a whole nother talk, and I have opinions on some
Maybe
things.
we can talk about that whenever we talk about our thoughts on this book.
Yeah.
But I think this is very interesting. So this is a dual POV book. And it's kind of, he talked about this in his talk about how the radio was so influential. And, you know, like, we don't think of it like that, you know. It's just, like, something you listen to in the car. But when it came out, it's, like, all of a sudden you could hear news from everywhere.
It was, like, your biggest form of communication.
Yeah, because, like, the other one that had that was, like, the news, like, the printing press with, like, the newspapers. But I've read some of it, not a lot. But I'm very excited to read this because I'm not going to give it away because they'll talk about it, but the main character, Marie, she's very interesting. And it's kind of you don't see these kind of main characters a lot, I will say. And
disability representation.
Yes, it does have disability representation in it. But yeah, we're excited, and that's probably what our next podcast will be about, is our thoughts so far, because it's take us like a month, which I think will be after Thanksgiving break is when we'll be done with it.
Yeah.
But to give a little insight on the schedule, we're hoping to do this once every 2 weeks around. You know, if we get around to doing more. I mean, right now it's just really busy for both of us. So maybe next semester we'll be able to do it more often. But every 2 weeks is our goal right now for this semester.
Yeah.
But that's all that we pretty much have to say.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if anybody has any, like, topics that they want us to, like, talk about, we can look into it.
Or any future recommendations for books of the month. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we have a couple chose out, but not
too extensive, like this one, and then you want to do the Fairy Loot edition of Sing Me to Sleep.
I know we both have Defy the Night.
Oh, yeah, we did get that. Okay, I love the bargain section at Books A Million.
Definitely recommend.
Yes.
But yeah, you know, thanks for listening, and keep reading, y'all.
Yeah. Peace out.
Peace out.